Welcome back to the Pylon Cam YouTube channel. In this video, we got an interesting one. We're going to be talking about which quarterbacks will be on the move this offseason and the 2022 offseason. Today has been pretty spicy. A lot of head coaches have been hired. I believe the Bears hired Matt Eberflus. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. The defensive coordinator for the Colts. And then more importantly, I think this happened yesterday, but the Broncos hired Nathaniel Hackett, the Packers offensive coordinator. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and get into the nitty gritty of this video. We're going to talk about a lot of interesting quarterbacks that I think are generating the hype warranted it's getting. So let's go ahead and get into this. To start off, I think this is the most interesting quarterback potentially on the move, and that is Aaron Rodgers. I know a lot of people think there's a chance he stays in Green Bay. I don't think so at all. I think he's definitely going to be moved this year. The Packers have, I think, a bottom two worst cap situation in the NFL. They are so many millions of dollars in debt. I don't know if that's the right word, but they have to pay out so much money that they need to start moving players off of their books, and they have a lot of maybe the most pending unrestricted free agents this offseason. But why Aaron Rodgers is on here, I think let's talk about the situation first. And I just wanted to say every team in this video is known to be exploring the option to move their quarterback. And I think one team in specific that I didn't list for any of these candidates particularly is because they wouldn't move their quarterback, but he might retire, and that's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think Tom Brady has no interest going through free agency again or going through trade talks. I think if he's going to quit playing, it will be as a Buccaneer. And then I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the Goat House. I kind of totally copied their layout, and I don't want to do that without giving them any credit or recognition for it. You should definitely go check out their channel. I'll link their channel in the description of this video, but let's talk about Aaron Rodgers. So if you don't know, the cap cleared, or let me back up. The NFL season or NFL year starts on June 1st, right? So anybody moved prior to June 1st the team does not owe them any money in bonuses. So that's why you see cap cleared and then post June 1st. So the cap cleared for Aaron Rodgers, if they move him before June 1st, will be $26.47 million. He said today, I believe, that he will have an answer for the Packers on what his offseason move or stance, I guess, will be by the end of today. But I am very heavily anticipating a move. I think he wants to win another Super Bowl ring. I think he's got at least one more year left in the tank, maybe two, depending on how he feels, what he wants to do with his life, blah, 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 blah. But if they move him post-June 1st, because of his bonuses, it will be a $46.14 million cap hit for the Packers or for whoever trades for him. And these numbers I got from, I forgot the name of the website, but I'll link that website in the description below. I think the value for Aaron Rodgers is at least 2 first-round picks. And let me explain this too. I think value is kind of very subjective depending on the team. But I think for a player like Aaron Rodgers, the only candidates that would pursue Aaron Rodgers or pay a premium for him are the teams that are in position to win now. So why I said the Nathaniel Hackett hiring was super important is because I think the Broncos are the number one team to pursue Aaron Rodgers, and now they have the leverage of, hey, Aaron, we have your old offensive coordinator, and Aaron may hate that, but I think he's going to like it because he did just win an MVP season under Matt LaFleur and Nathaniel Hackett. But I think at least any of these teams would pay at least 2 firsts. For the Colts, it'll probably have to be a little bit more because of they do not have a first this year, so their first would have to be backloaded to 2023 and 2024 respectively, and then whatever else they need. But I do think, let me start with the Broncos before I get ahead of myself. Why I think the Broncos are the most ideal situation for Aaron Rodgers is, 1, they're in a position to win now. 2, they just hired his old offensive coordinator as their head coach. And 3, he has an offensive line and a defense that's going to help him, but more importantly, he has never had the skill position players in volume like the Broncos have to offer. He's only ever played with 1 or 2 premium receivers at a time, whether that was Jordy Nelson or Devontae Adams or Randall Cobb. He's never had a whole arsenal of weapons to go to. The Broncos, they have Noah Fant, Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, who I think is super slept on and is super underrated. I think if he gets some proper quarterback play, he's a candidate to break out in 2022. And then obviously they have Tim Patrick, who I have been speculating that the Packers are going to try to move Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers. And if that were the case, I would expect the Broncos to send picks and whatever they need to get Devontae Adams, because that would put them in contention for the Super Bowl almost instantly. If a team does not want to pay the 2 firsts, I still believe it will cost at least 1 first and value players. I think that's something that's not talked about often in these types of videos, where it's not understood. Like, obviously, real life trades are way different than fantasy. However, players do have value, and the thing that matters is for the Packers, a team that's going into a rebuild, they need to replace Devontae Adams, Aaron Rodgers with players of value. And I think if the Broncos were to send Jerry Jeudy to Green Bay, it does kind of knock off some of the pick value that they would need to spend in order to get Aaron Rodgers and possibly even Devontae Smith. I think the Steelers are another team that is very heavily in contention for Aaron Rodgers. The issue I'm seeing is it will really halt their momentum, but I don't really know if momentum is the right word, but it'll halt the moves they are preparing to make to fix the offensive line. However, all of these teams are either currently in position to acquire the asset they're seeking, or can make minimal movements to their active roster to acquire the asset they're seeking. The Steelers are a team that I think they're in a good enough cap position to just trade for Aaron Rodgers, and that'll consume most of the cap they have for 2022, but they still can do it. And I do believe that Aaron Rodgers with that defense and Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, and I'm saying this name now because I do believe that Juju Smith-Schuster will move, and I've been saying this for at least a week and a half now to all my fantasy buddies. I do believe Ray McCloud is a very, 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 very viable slot receiver. We saw his targets increase throughout the end of the season. He seems to be reliable in terms of his receptions per target ratio. And they have Najee Harris, along with the Broncos having my boy Javonte Williams. I think both of these teams definitely can make the move pretty easily, given their current cap situation. Now, for the next team, the Colts, it'll be a little bit tricky because their cap situation isn't the best, but the draw they have is they are a very competitive team. They have a top 3 offensive line of football, and their defense is very, very well coached. The drawback is they're going to have to alter their roster in order to acquire Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron Rodgers did come out and say that he wants to bring Devontae Adams and Marcus Valdes-Scantling with him wherever he goes. But I think if he goes to a team with the weapons that the Steelers and Broncos have to offer, it wouldn't be that big of a move, or it wouldn't be that big of an issue. But for the Colts, they really only have Michael Pittman and Jonathan Taylor as their 2 most viable assets on offense. And I don't think the Packers are in a position where they desperately or would really value a running back that highly because they have A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones. The Colts would have to alter their defensive unit in order to make this acquisition, I believe, because Michael Pittman, I also believe, is still on his rookie contract, which would make the most sense. And then the last team is the Cleveland Browns. I think Kevin Stefanski has been leaving breadcrumbs that they do not want Baker Mayfield to be their quarterback moving forward. And I know that could come off as controversial, but let me explain it, because this explanation might be a little bit lengthy, but it's going to be the same reasoning for every team that I have the Browns listed as potential candidates. First and foremost, who was there when Baker Mayfield was drafted? Not Kevin Stefanski and not their general manager. So they didn't pick Baker Mayfield. Secondly, what did Kevin Stefanski say in his press conference when asked during the season, are you thinking about benching Baker Mayfield? And he didn't say no, Baker's our guy moving forward. His exact response was, and I quote, "Why would I do that?" Because I think by letting Baker play, even with the injuries, it is now public knowledge that Baker is not that guy. Not that guy, pal. And then 3, what was the first thing that Kevin Stefanski did after becoming head coach? The I believe it was the first roster move he made when he got hired. He went out and signed Case Keenum. What have Browns players been saying during the season when Case Keenum came to play or had the start? There is no difference between Baker Mayfield, a first overall pick, and Case Keenum. Now, I know a lot of Browns fans are going to come for my throat because of this argument, but I'm just saying whether you think Baker Mayfield can play or not is not what I'm arguing. It's that Kevin Stefanski does not want him, is my point. And I don't think the general manager wants him, and I think a lot of Cleveland doesn't want him now. But these are my picks for Aaron Rodgers. My front-runner favorite, I should have put like a little favorite text over which one, but my favorite is the Denver Broncos to go out and get Aaron Rodgers. I think because they just hired a head Packer personnel, as in the offensive coordinator, to be their head coach, it is the first move to make in acquiring Aaron Rodgers via trade. And I think they are a team that's going to be willing to pay premium for what Aaron Rodgers wants. Person is Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson, if traded before June 1st, is $19 million. Post June 1st is $37 million if you factor in the bonuses. I am certain that Russell Wilson will not return to the Seahawks. He's also already said he wants to explore his free agency options, and I think that was the polite way of saying, hey, Pete Carroll, hey, Seahawks, thanks for everything. I'm not coming back. The value for Russell Wilson, I think, has dipped a little bit because of his play this year. But again, Russell Wilson is also a player who has had to overcome everything that the Seahawks have thrown at him with a bad offensive line for almost every single year he's been there. And I think he's to an age where he can't do it as well as he did prior. And after the finger surgery and the finger injury and everything, he really hasn't played that well. However, for these teams that are all in, they're going to pay the premium for Russell Wilson because they believe he could take them to the Super Bowl or deep into the postseason this year, as in 2022. Broncos, same reasoning. Great offensive line, great weapons, great defense. The offensive line is the biggest draw for Russell Wilson because his biggest gripe in Seattle was, I have not had an offensive line. The Steelers, they can make the move, but again, there's that same issue of the offensive line play is pretty poor. And then the Colts have the best offensive line out of any team, maybe not the Browns, but out of any team listed out of these 4. And they can make the move with where they currently stand, I believe. It just depends on if the trade happens before June 1st. And I think the Seahawks would be willing to trade for, let's just say, Carson Wentz and some players because they're at a point where they need a stopgap quarterback. They need a bridge quarterback who's going to let them start the rebuild, clear the books, and draft, and then be able to go out and sign people. And I think I think one of the most enticing offers actually would come from the Browns because Baker's doesn't have a crazy contract, and even though they picked up the 5th-year option, it's only $20 million, which is kind of pricey for a stopgap, but quarterbacks are expensive. I think my favorite for Russell Wilson is probably between the Colts if they could work some magic on their cap space, and the Browns if they could if they just are willing to make the deal. I think all of these teams, because of Russell Wilson's pretty low annual salary, pre-bonus, all of these teams can make the move. I know the Broncos can for sure, and I know the Steelers can for sure. I believe both Colts and Browns can if they act before June 1st. The next quarterback on this list is Deshaun Watson, and I think he's probably the most hot topic quarterback this year. And here's what I'll say about this. The Dolphins owner during the season was the one who wanted Deshaun Watson, right? But Brian Flores defended Tua, but then came out he wanted Deshaun Watson as well. So I'm not sure why they didn't move for Deshaun Watson, aside from the sexual, I don't know if it's misconduct. It's not rape, but he's like a serial sexual offender because of all the masseuses he's been groping. And the NFL is notorious for waiting to install suspensions or institute suspensions before or after a trade is done or before the season starts. And I think, well, let me talk about the cap cleared. He's a little bit expensive. He's probably, besides Aaron, the most expensive on this list in terms of base salary. But the post June 1st adds $5 million to his salary because the bonuses are now in play. But let me break it down as to why the Browns are my favorite for Deshaun Watson. If they make some adjustments to their roster and clear, I believe they need to clear $10 million to make this trade happen. If Deshaun Watson is suspended this year, it does not matter because they have Baker Mayfield on the fifth-year option anyway. So you're going to play Baker for one more year, hopefully increase his trade stock, and then either let him go into free agency or try to trade him. Deshaun Watson will be ready to play in 2023 pending his suspension. I believe it'll probably be a one-year suspension because the NFL is kind of soft. I think the Steelers could make a move for him. It would really stunt them next year because they would have to play with Dwayne Haskins or Mason Rudolph, and it probably will result in the first losing season of Mike Tomlin's career. But then the next year, they'll be right back to where they were in terms of the playoff race years prior. And the Panthers, I think why I put the Panthers on this list is, one, they can make the move, but two, they've shown interest, and three, they probably have the most player assets worth trading, right? They could trade McCaffrey. They could trade Robbie Anderson. They could trade some of their defensive pieces. They have the most players where if they moved them along with the picks, and they're stuck with Sam Darnold for a year regardless. So if they take this cap hit, Sam Darnold is going to play next year, and the year after that, and hopefully they could rebuild a little bit through the draft if they don't have to sacrifice so much draft capital, they'll be in contention. And with the way that the NFC South is shaping as of recently, with Tom Brady potentially retiring, Sean Payton being gone, the Falcons are in limbo land, the Panthers could be the up-and-coming team of the NFC South. So my favorite as of right now is the Browns, and I've been saying this all season that the Browns will trade for Deshaun Watson. I hope it happens. I think it makes them immediate contenders in the AFC, and I do believe he will be the best quarterback in the AFC North. And I know that could come off as controversial with how Joe Burrow is playing. Lamar Jackson is still Lamar Jackson. But the Steelers are a big question mark. The Browns, in my opinion, would have the best quarterback in the division, and here's why. The last season that the last season Deshaun Watson played, he is the only quarterback, I believe, in NFL history to have thrown 5,000 yards with one 1,000-yard receiver. That is insane if you think about it. How did he get 5,000 yards with, or maybe just under 5,000 yards? But how did he get basically 5,000 yards with only one receiver putting up 1,000 yards? That is, I really do think when Deshaun Watson was playing, he was probably the third best quarterback in the NFL, even though they didn't win that many games. And I don't think that's crazy to think about. The next quarterback on this list is Jimmy Garoppolo. I think with Jimmy, the thing is he's pretty expensive. So teams that could afford him will go out and get him. But I think the appeal to him is in the mentor, stopgap, bridge quarterback role, right? That's why I think for Washington, if they could trade for Jimmy, I don't think his value is that high, even though he's in the NFC Championship. He's not playing that well. So it's not the narrative literally cannot be Jimmy Garoppolo is the reason the Niners are in the NFC Championship, because it's just not true. I think he's thrown one touchdown this whole postseason, and I could be wrong on that. But I know it's definitely under 5, for sure, and it's probably under 3. The cap cleared for the Niners would be $24.2 million, and I think they would want to clear that cap because they're going to try to invest in ways to make Trey Lance's life in transition to the starter as easy as possible. If this trade is done post June 1st, the appeal is a little bit less attractive a little bit less attractive because there's another basically $3 million on the books, $2.7 million. I think Jimmy's worth at least a second plus. And then if you want to throw in value players, a third plus something. I think the best overall fit for him would be with the Washington football team, Seattle Seahawks, and Carolina Panthers. And why I'm kind of ruling out the Steelers is there is this scenario where the Steelers draft, let's say, Malik Willis, and they go out and trade for Jimmy for a year and sign and keep him for 1 year to just groom Malik Willis and let Malik Willis adjust to play speed, or Matt Corral, or any of these quarterbacks that you want to put here. I think the only 2 quarterbacks in this draft, if you want to hear my thoughts on that, check out our mock draft videos. I'll have the latest one linked in the comments. But I think the only 2 that could play in this draft are Sam Howell and Kenny Pickett, like right away. I'm not saying that all of them are going to be busts. I'm just saying the ones that I would feel comfortable drafting and starting right away are Kenny Pickett and Sam Howell. And I think the Steelers, there is a scenario if they could get Jimmy cheap enough, they make this trade and draft their quarterback of the future. But I think for someone like Washington, who they think they could probably make some noise in the NFC East, the quarterback play is really lacking. They would be able to sell some of their draft capital, probably more draft capital than the Seahawks. Seahawks have none. And then probably more than the Panthers, because I think the Panthers really are going to try to hit a home run in signing one of these big name quarterbacks. And I don't think they would believe there's much of a difference between Jimmy and Sam Darnold. Now, I'm not saying Sam Darnold's as good as Jimmy, but how many more games does Jimmy win you on a worse team than Sam Darnold does? And not to say, I just don't think it makes sense for the Panthers, because I think they're going to try to draft someone this year and let them sit behind Sam Darnold, but it still could happen. There's still definitely I put the Panthers on here in the scenario that Tom Brady retires, because if Tom Brady retires, this division is completely up for grabs, and I would argue that the Panthers are in the best cap situation and the best position to win now with Jimmy Garoppolo than the Bucs without Tom Brady. The Saints are without Sean Payton, and they have the worst cap situation in the NFL. And who's the other team? Who did I say? Saints, Bucs, and the Falcons. We're going to talk about the Falcons later in this video, but I think Washington's probably my favorite to make this move, because I think they are in a scenario where they believe their team is good enough to win the NFC East. They did win it not this year, but in 2020. And I think they could reclaim that title next year. But the next quarterback is Tua. And why I put Tua on here is, if the reports are true that the owner didn't want Tua and Brian Flores didn't want Tua but publicly defended Tua, he's not well liked in the building. And I agree that he's in one of the worst offensive situations in the league. However, let me use a counterexample, right? Daniel Jones is also in one of the worst situations in the league, but John Mara and now Joe Shane have both said they want Daniel Jones to play there. And John Mara did back Daniel Jones last year. Tua has not been backed, and it's really up for question if he's wanted, especially by the new head coach, whoever they hire. But I think there is a draw for Tua, being that he's a young quarterback. He could potentially be developed. And his cap situation, if you trade for him before June 1st, isn't crazy. It's literally under $1 million. It's only $895,000. But post June 1st, it's $8 million. And obviously the team would inherit that contract and probably look to restructure it, potentially. But I think the value of Tua would definitely be at least worth a first-round pick. So I think everybody understands he's in a crappy situation. There's been turnover. Not turnover, but Brian Flores isn't the best offensive-minded coach. But the other thing is he's probably worth a third-round pick or second-round pick if you include value players. I think Washington might see Tua as an opportunity of maybe we could, like the Panthers thought with Sam Darnold, maybe we could trade for Tua and he could be our guy moving forward. Or the Saints, we have Jameis Winston, and, we're in a position where we're not going to keep Jameis Winston for that long, probably beyond this upcoming year. The Seahawks, same thing. They need to get a quarterback of the future. The Panthers, again, I think they're big buyers they have the ammo to go get someone big. But I do believe probably my favorite landing spot for Tua potentially is Seattle. I think Seattle would look at this as an opportunity to take some money off of their books and have a quarterback they could potentially groom for the future. But again, I think there is the scenario where Tua stays in Miami. I just think Miami is such a popular name or a popular landing spot given their defense and how well their overall team is. They just need to really touch up that offensive line. Well, their offense is trash. They have one receiver. One of them is a tight end. And they have two receivers. One of them is a tight end. They have one of the worst offensive lines of football. And that's about it. So I think he might stay in Miami, but I would not be shocked if Tua is on the move this offseason. And I think all of these teams, maybe besides the Panthers, are buyers for Tua. I think the Panthers probably could get him the cheapest, though. Derek Carr is another big name who I think will be on the move, and I think because of his value, he is worth a dime, like a nickel and dime this year. I think a lot of these teams will make a move for him. Miami is definitely a buyer for Derek Carr. I think they could. This is Derek Carr is always brought up in rumors of will he be moved? Will he be moved? I think this is the year. They fired Mike Mayock. They fired Rich Bisaccia will not be the head coach moving forward. And their head coach is to be determined. With the completely new regime, they're probably going to want to start a rebuild, even though they're pretty competitive now. But I think the right side of their offensive line definitely needs to be touched up. They need to get some weapons in the receiver department. And I think for Derek Carr, it's just being that he has 1 year left on his contract anyway, and he's worth so cheap, and he is a very talented player. A lot of teams are going to see him as an upgrade. The Dolphins would be a big player in that role. The Steelers, I think as well, they could see like Derek Carr as a quarterback they could work with and be able to push the ball down the field. I think my favorite so far is the Colts. I think given the Colts cap situation, Derek Carr is the most cost efficient, and they could keep their team intact. And he probably would cost minimal value in a trade, being that you probably have to give up a second, third, and something next year, or a second or a third and plus a value player or something like that. But the Colts are a relatively young team, and they could the Raiders probably see this as an opportunity to help their team out for the future and then do it in the draft. So I think Derek Carr definitely will be on the move. I really like him to the Colts. The only thing with the Colts is they don't have their first-round pick this year. I believe they're missing a few other picks, but I believe they have their second and third picks at the least. So they could package those up, package a pick for next year, and go on with their merry way. I think Derek Carr probably would be the best quarterback in the AFC South because Ryan Tannehill has shown this year he has fallen far from where he was a few years ago when they were in the AFC Championship. And he's become a liability. I think the AFC South is definitely wide open with the Texans and the Jaguars being with where they're at, but the Colts definitely would be my front runner moving forward for that division. They were my front runner this year. And I think if they had a different quarterback, they definitely win that division. Panthers, again, I think the Panthers see him as an opportunity to be competitive this year. It just depends on what price they would want to give. Because I could see them giving a first and like a sixth or something, a first and a fifth, or first, a fifth, and a fourth next year, and that would be enough to get Carr because the Raiders are going into rebuild mode, and he's so cheap. So I think with how cheap he is, it's not. And think about this too, like the Raiders need to clear cap space, and if they just pay Carr and then let him walk into free agency, it's $20 million down the drain. But anyways, the next player on this list is Kirk Cousins, and you're going to see that there's really no competitive teams on this list, and here's why. First of all, he's worth a boatload of money. He is worth so much money. $35 million this year and $45 million post June 1st. And I just think he's proven enough that he can't win in big spots, and I don't think that's anything against Kirk Cousins. He's a great regular season quarterback, but he can't get it together in prime time or against 500 teams, and I think a team willing to compete knows that. And the Vikings are not a bad roster by any means. They have their weaknesses, but they're not bad. They have great skill position players. Their offensive line improved throughout the year. It's still pretty bad, but it did get better. And their defense, their secondary definitely needs work. But I think no team is going to be willing to pay. I think Carr is viewed as a very expensive stopgap quarterback. My favorite for him would be just the Vikings to keep him because I don't think anybody's going to want to pay the asking price unless it's dirt cheap. But my favorite for him is the Vikings. A team I could see moving for him is if maybe potentially Washington wants him back. As we know, Kirk Cousins did play in Washington for a while at the beginning of his career. I don't think it makes sense for the Seahawks cap situation, and I don't think it makes sense for the Raiders as they're trying to rebuild. At least I think they're trying to rebuild. But if they do think that they could still compete and keep trying to compete, then it does make sense for the Raiders. But again, it's a huge hit for your cap situation. And if you're not a team that's ready to go in the playoffs, the Raiders potentially should have won that game, but I think Derek Carr is a much better quarterback than Kirk Cousins. And Kirk Cousins can't make it work with a better offense than what the Raiders have to offer. So that's kind of how I view Kirk Cousins. He's at least worth a second round pick plus or a third plus value players. I just think he stays with the Vikings. I don't think they're going to make a move for him, even as the new regime comes in with a new head coach, a new GM. They could try to clear their books, but it just doesn't make sense to just let him rot. I think it makes the most sense to just pay him now. He's off your books, and then go off into the rebuild. The next player, and I believe the last player on this list, is Matt Ryan. This is what I'm talking about with the Falcons. The Falcons are in such a bad spot, but they have no money, and it makes no sense. They're paying Matt Ryan literally $32 million in bonuses on top of his annual salary of $16 million. And I don't think anybody wants Matt Ryan, personally. I don't know how much better he makes your team. He really struggled to push the ball down the field this year, at least in the first 5 weeks. Because that was my theory for why Kyle Pitts wasn't playing as well as he should have, is I think that Matt Ryan was hurt to start the year, and it was not on the injury report because it was a minor injury. But I think that really was holding him back from throwing the ball down the field. And being that they have really no backup option at quarterback, he had to play through it. I think that he stays with the Falcons. I think you're not going to get anything for him. I don't think anybody really would want him, maybe besides Washington, because I think Washington has good enough cap space, but I don't think anybody's going to want to inherit that contract, is the thing. And now, obviously, contracts will be restructured post-trade and all that stuff, but the base cap is really what I'm looking at. If it's done before, I think everybody should try to move for June 1st, except if you're trading for Derek Carr, because the difference in cap situation is only $100,000, I think. But I don't see anybody moving for him, maybe except for Washington, and they'd obviously restructure all those bonuses and stuff. But I don't think the Falcons have any leverage in a trade. So they're not going to get much for him. He's been a Falcon his entire career. Might as well just let him retire a Falcon. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this video. That's going to do it for where I think these quarterbacks are going to land. Let me know your thoughts and comments in below. And if I'm still learning how all the cap works, so if I made any errors with the numbers, please just let me know in the comments, because I want to learn. I'm not going to fight you if you're right and I'm wrong. That's just not going to happen, because that would make me an idiot. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this video. That's going to do it for my thoughts on these QBs, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace!